You have nothing to be scared of. I would never hurt you or anyone.
Jesus and Brandon have a breakthrough while Mariana finds her inner tough girl in this week's episode of The Fosters. Let's break it down on what happened. Hey y'all, welcome back to your weekly dose of The Fosters with me, Lisa. This week's episode is called Too Fast, Too Furious, and sadly, there's no Vin Diesel or Dwayne Johnson in this episode. This week's episode is really about relationships. Some relationships are mending while others are ending, and characters are getting closure. Not gonna lie, there's a few characters that I used to like that are really starting to annoy me. Callie Aaron. And oddly enough, Mariana is one of my favorites in this episode. So let's get this recap started. Mike and AJ are finally back, and it's a pretty big episode for Mike. He proposes to Anna. For AJ, we learn that he's still with Dawn, but he's also with some other girls because they're not exclusive. Brandon doesn't really seem to approve of this, and he and AJ butt heads per usual in this episode. But AJ fits more into the Callie storyline, so I'll talk about this when I get to her. Next up, Mariana. So it looks like her friendship with Emma is really over, as Mariana goes to congratulate Emma and the rest of the robotics team on their trophy. And Emma brings up that even though Drew shut down STEM for now, they're gonna continue to hold it off campus. And then Emma gets snarky saying, "I'll let you know when and where." Not really, Emma. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I'm no longer hashtag Team Emma. And you can tell that Mariana, even though she plays it off like it has no effect on her, she walks away and you can just see the hurt in her face. And it's one of the first times I've really kind of felt for Mariana after all the stuff that she's done. It's okay though, because Mariana has something new to focus on: roller derby. Now, Mariana really wants these girls to like her after learning that no one kind of liked her on the robotics team, so she brings treats to her first day of practice. Now, she's not really the best at this. She's not a graceful skater and obviously isn't too hot on her first few days. She's actually says that she's not used to not being great at everything.
Keep it up, keep it up!
Well, Jimena is really looking after Mariana, which seems to kind of cause a little bit of jealousy when it comes to Jimena's sister Poppy. She wants to be a jammer, but Jimena keeps making her a blocker, and then tells Mariana that she'd be a good jammer. Yeah, Poppy doesn't really seem to like this, even pulls a dirty hit on Mariana, which actually does fire up Mariana and makes her shine at practice. But it doesn't go so well with Jimena, and she threatens to kick Poppy off the team if she sees something like that again. Now, by the end, Mariana, like I said, is finding her confidence with this sport, and she's really enthusiastic about it. Now, earlier in practice, Poppy invited Mariana to a movie. Then, after all this jealousy kind of stuff, she cancels on Mariana, saying that she has plans with the other girls. But then at the end of that, ends up inviting Mariana too. So at this point, I'm not really quite sure how I should read Poppy. Is she actually genuinely going to be a friend to Mariana? Or will this jealousy cause her to maybe be one of those people that pretends to be nice to Mariana then stabs her in the back? I mean, Mariana could really use a good friend at this point, so I'm hoping that Poppy is the former of what I said. Mariana also almost gets caught by Lena when Lena walks into the bathroom and sees the nasty bruise on Mariana's leg. All's good for now though, because Lena buys that lie that Mariana fell at school. Now let's hop over to Jesus and Emma. Emma asks Brandon for the truth about what Jesus did to his room, and well, she gets it. As a doctor, Jesus is still more concerned about not being able to get it up than I feel like what's going on with his brain, but I guess that's a 16-year-old boy for you, right? Don't quote me on that. I'm sure there's 16-year-old boys out there that aren't very concerned with if they can get it up or not. Steph and Lena bring up Jesus' impulse control and anger issues, and that's when Jesus brings up that Lena's scared of him and thinks he's a monster. Damage control has to be done here, and then the doctor says, you know what, we can try some different anti-seizure meds that maybe won't have that effect on your libido, as well as give him a low dose of ADHD meds to maybe help with, you know, those anger outbursts and everything. When Jesus leaves the office, the doctor basically tells Steph and Lena that no pill is going to make Jesus what he used to be, because Lena and Steph just seem to want old Jesus back. Brain cells don't regenerate, but they reorganize, so Jesus is making improvements physically, but emotionally it might not happen. It's gonna take some time. Emma is still pretty much avoiding actually seeing Jesus face to face, so instead they're FaceTiming, and Emma finally addresses what's been bugging her. She brings up what Jesus did to Brandon's stuff, like the door and smashing the piano or keyboard, and how it scares her. Now, Jesus tells her that he'd never hurt anyone, and then he runs outside to confront Brandon for opening his big mouth. They then start to get in a shoving match, and Lena is there to stop it. Jesus then goes to see Emma after wrestling practice, and they finally seem to hash out everything face to face, dealing with how each other felt about the abortion, who had the right to do what, and, say what to who, and just all of that drama that's been building up. Emma tells Jesus she can't be with him if he feels betrayed or angered by what she did, or if he keeps tormenting Brandon, who was honestly just trying to be there for her, but also in turn really help Jesus. Now, while it seems like Jesus and Emma might be over as she kind of walks away from their conversation, we get the best brotherly moment from Brandon and Jesus. That's right, they weren't fighting, they were hugging it out.
Hug me, brother!
Brandon's going to stay with Mike for a bit in order to let Jesus cool off, so when Jesus goes into Brandon's room when he's packing, Jesus apologizes for taking everything out on Brandon, and that he's really just afraid of not being the same again. Brandon then tells Jesus, well, the truth, you're not going to be the same. But then he brings up the story about when he got his hand smashed and he never thought that he would play piano again. Jesus brings up, well, you did, and Brandon says, I just had to learn a new way. How? So essentially Brandon's like, you just got to be patient, you're gonna come back from this. You might not be the same, but you will be good again.
It's okay.
I mean, look at Brandon coming through with kind of the right advice at the right time. Now Jesus, he's inspired by this, but I think he might be taking it in a way that he shouldn't. Not sure. He goes to Steph and Lena to talk about him possibly going back to school, and they tell Jesus that if he is, he needs an assessment, and then if he goes to school, he has to have a paraprofessional or an educational aide with him at all times. Jesus is not happy about this aide thing, and so he comes up with his own plan. He's gonna get his GED and then go work construction with Gabe. And Steph does not want Jesus to be like Gabe in any way, so her and Lena are totally against this, obviously angering Jesus, who storms off again. Now moving on to Brandon. Things seem to be good with him and Grace. They're planning Coachella's trip and everything. Then after Jesus' blow up, Grace invites Brandon to stay with her until things blow over. And Brandon says sure. And things seem to be good until he goes over to Mike's for dinner and has a conversation with Mike, AJ, and Anna, which, makes him take a step back and tell Grace that it isn't okay with his mom, so he's going to stay with Mike for a bit, even though it never had anything to do with him asking the moms. The gist of that conversation was basically talking about getting in over your head and rushing in commitment and whatnot, and AJ even took a stab there, bringing up Courtney and Mason. Well, speaking of Courtney and Mason, they're back in this episode, and Courtney asks Brandon last minute to babysit. Now, Grace shows up at the house thinking she and Brandon are hanging out, but since her one thing a day that scares her is not having her phone for this period of 24 hours, she didn't get the text from Brandon saying he had to cancel. Instead, she helps Brandon babysit, and it's actually kind of adorable. It isn't until the end of the day when Steph returns home that she learns that Mason is actually Courtney's kid. And then things get even more awkward when Mason asks Brandon when he's coming back to live with them. So now Grace brings up Brandon living with Courtney, and it's like, you didn't want to come stay with me, but you lived with Courtney, all of that. And Brandon kind of explains that he said he couldn't stay with Grace because he thinks that they're moving too fast, and he tends to really get in over his head, which is what happened with Courtney, and then he tends to take on the caretaker role, which is what got him in trouble with Courtney and his family there, moving in, paying for Courtney and everything. Brandon says he doesn't want to make those same mistakes with Grace because he actually really likes her, and thankfully Grace really likes him. But Brandon, the caretaker stuff, it's a good quality, but also it's one of his biggest flaws, and it's causing him some trouble. When Courtney comes to pick up Mason, she reveals she has no place to really stay for a week while she waits to move into her new apartment. So Brandon says that she and Mason can stay in the garage while Gabe is out on a job. Now, I don't think Grace or even the moms are gonna be too happy about this one. Lastly, let's talk about Callie. Girl, Callie, you got me frustrated in this episode. Like, I know you've been through a lot, but you have to lighten up. You have to, start to let people in, even if it's just a tiny bit. Stop holding those grudges. So at the beginning of the episode, Brandon and Callie see AJ making out with his girl at school, and yes, it's a little awkward. The two of them basically say, oh, AJ didn't waste any time, huh? But then it's like, Callie, can you really talk? Because you're already with Aaron, which was pretty quick after your AJ breakup. When AJ comes over to Callie's locker to kind of be civil and is like, hey, I heard Troy confessed, Callie just makes it awkward and ends up rushing off to class. Now, Callie and Aaron, they're making out in Callie's room, and things seem to be heating up until Steph walks in. Aaron's like, we need some privacy, girl. Next time we're going over to my place. Steph tells Callie that she ran into Cole at the LGBT center and he says hi and wants to get together. Now Aaron and Cole actually do know each other, and Aaron asks if Cole knows that they're dating. And then he brings up the crush that Cole had on Callie. And Callie tries to pretend like Cole didn't really have a crush on her. When Cole and Callie get together, Callie learns that Cole's happy and has a girlfriend named Marissa, and he asks if Callie is still with AJ. And that's when it gets a little weird as Callie tells Cole that she's actually seeing Aaron. Now Cole seems pretty surprised by this because he thought the reason that she didn't want to date him or wasn't interested in him was because he's trans. And he would rather believe that than that fact that Callie actually just wasn't attracted to him in general. After working through that little bit, Callie then asks Cole's advice when it comes to sex with Aaron because she thinks Aaron wants to have sex since he asked her, let's go to my place, have some privacy. Callie takes some of Cole's tips into consideration when she's over at Aaron's and they're making out, but let's just say they're more of a mood killer. When Aaron asks what's going on, Callie confesses to him that she asked Cole for some advice when it came to sex, and now Aaron's kind of upset because he really just wanted Callie to talk to him about this. Aaron then tells her, he's not even ready for sex, and then Callie automatically assumes it's because of her. But Aaron says it's more of a trust thing, and he just wants to make sure, he's not just a rebound for AJ because sex is a very vulnerable thing. But unfortunately, this turns Callie even more on the defensive.
I'm really sick of boys telling me how I feel and how complicated I am. I'm not the only one who complicates things.
Callie leaves and then goes to see AJ, and it's kind of a battle of who's to blame for what. Callie basically just says she needs some closure, and AJ's trying to give it to her. And it seems like they're sort of getting there until Callie tells AJ that she's seeing Aaron. And that doesn't really quite sit well with him considering everything that happened. AJ then says, so you want me to take all the blame? Well, you know what? It's a two-way street. We both made everything hard and we both made it end. Well, I guess that was enough closure for Callie. So she goes back to Aaron and tells him that he's not just a rebound. She's just not over the fact that AJ really hurt her, and she's actually not ready for sex either. Now, when Aaron asks why she was going to have sex with him then, even though he wasn't going to let it happen, Callie brings up that she was worried that he would think it was more because that he's trans, not that they weren't ready for sex. And Aaron assures her that he would never think that. They then both agree that, they just need to take things slow, and when they're ready to take the next step, finally, Callie will bring all her questions about sex and stuff to Aaron. Alright, so that wraps up this episode. I am honestly super happy that Brandon and Jesus finally made up. I really hope that it stays that way. I'm kind of over Emma, but I am glad that Mariana is finding something new to put her energy into. I'm just hoping Poppy doesn't screw her over. And I thought it was actually really cool to have Cole and Aaron both in an episode. Once again though, there was no Jude, which is kind of a bummer. Now let's check out the promo for next week.
You can't go to a party.
Okay, then neither can you, or I'll tell.
A little dishonesty
Don't be surprised when it blows up in your face.
This is sick!
goes way too far.
I'm trying to help you get better, and then you go and pull something like this?
No one is immune from the consequences.
Why do I feel like I'm in this all by myself?
Go pour yourself another glass of wine.
Okay, looks like we are only like 5 episodes in with the upcoming episode, and the drama is already starting to like hit a peak. That party and what happens there looks like it's gonna cause Lena to really reach her boiling point, and I don't want Steph and Lena to fight again. I guess it's too much to kind of ask for happy episodes, right? Because if everything was happy, would we still be watching? Okay, so now it's time for you to weigh in on this episode in the comments below or on my socials with your favorite parts of this episode and what you think is gonna happen next. What do you think is gonna happen with that party in the next episode? After that, you can click right over here to check out my other TV recaps from this week, and don't forget to subscribe so we can continue talking about all things TV and movies. As always, I'm Lisa. Thanks for hanging out with me right here on What Happened.